All right, everybody. It says I'm live, and if that's the case, please let me know in the chat. That way we can get this show rolling. And just to get everything started, I want to go ahead and mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. So if you need things related to preparedness, especially in the realm of self-defense and all that good stuff, make sure you check out Midway USA because by supporting them, you're also supporting me. So we got 4.9 by 5 people excited about getting going tonight because there's some things we got to talk about. 5 things we won't be able to afford in 2024. And that's just the way things look based on indications of cost increases. And that's something that everybody should be concerned about because you have to consider how far your resources will go when it comes to preparedness. And let's see, we have 5 by 5 ish coming in from Welcome to My Life. Jimmy of the Sea says all clear. Doggone it, hello to you as well. So glad we can get started tonight. And here's the thing. Obviously, some of us can afford these things in 2024, but most Americans, like a large majority of people at this point in time, are living paycheck to paycheck. They're picking up extra jobs. They're trying their best to stay ahead of the curve, and it's very difficult to do so based on today's cost of living and inflation and everything else. And by next year, all the things we're discussing tonight will be more expensive, which means those people might be priced out of some of the bare necessities that we need for basic survival in modern times. So this is a definite issue that we have to be aware of because as preppers, the less disposable income we have, the less prepared we can become. Because in general, in order to prepare, you have to have a level of surplus when it comes to resources, whether or not that's financial, energy, whether or not it's time, whatever resource it is that you need to apply to your preparedness, you're going to lose access to those resources if things become more expensive, whether or not that means you have to work more, so you're losing time in order to gain more money, or if you need to spend less, so now you're not able to purchase things that you would usually have purchased, or invest in your preparedness, or whatever it is, right? So here we are. And let's see, we have Derek Boodle saying most are living credit card to credit card. And that is a sad reality of our current situation. So what are these 5 things that are going to be basically unaffordable come 2024? And this is something that I thought was a reasonable conversation for us all to have here tonight. And the first thing that we really have to keep an eye on is fuel. And obviously, fuel can affect just about everything else we're going to talk about tonight as well. But fuel is on its way up. And as fuel becomes more expensive, so does everything else because it directly affects the supply chain. And if the supply chain becomes more expensive to operate, then everything that it produces becomes more expensive to acquire. So we're actually going with CNN on this one because I want to show you how ridiculous the media is when it comes to trying to put a spin on some of these situations. This is from 4 days ago, okay? In a bad omen for inflation, U.S. oil prices topped $90 a barrel for the first time this year. Okay? And this is from September 14th. U.S. oil prices climbed above $90 a barrel on Thursday for the first time in 10 months, threatening to push gasoline prices even higher and heat up inflation across the economy. High oil prices have already created an unusual situation where gasoline is getting more expensive even after the summer driving season has ended. Despite demand easing, gas prices are just pennies away from their highest level of the year. The national average for regular gasoline rose to $3.86 a gallon on Thursday, according to AAA. That's 6 cents higher than a week ago and 16 cents higher than the same day last year. Fuel is getting more expensive, and this always trickles down to everything else. The latest oil market rally has been driven by concerns about supply. First, Saudi Arabia and Russia surprised the market last week by extending their aggressive supply cuts through the end of the year. Then, catastrophic flooding in Libya raised concerns about supply disruptions in that OPEC nation. At least 5,000 people have died in Libya, and thousands more are feared missing. If all that supply in Libya were taken off the market for an extended period of time, that would force prices even higher, said Andy Lipow, president of consulting firm Lipow Oil Associates. So the expectation here is that gas is going to keep getting higher. And it, in all honesty, is likely to do so into the most difficult part of the year, which is winter when it comes to gas consumption. U.S. crude traded as high as $90.26 a barrel Thursday morning, up 2% on the day. That's the highest intraday price since November 8th, 2022, and also represents a 34% jump since mid-June. So not only is it climbing, but it's climbing quickly. And this is something that we are paying attention to, because as preppers, it's something that costs us a lot of money to have fuel on hand, to have our vehicles topped off, and for everything else that it touches on its way through the economy. There are now a dozen U.S. states averaging $4 a gallon or higher for regular gasoline, including Colorado, North Dakota, and California, according to AAA. And it's not that we produce all the oil here in North Dakota, but we kind of do in some ways. And I guess I have to pay for that. So it is what it is. But what do I do, right? So here's the other side of that equation that I wanted to share. And Mike H, thank you so much. I really appreciate the super chat. That's awesome. The other side is that CNN, just 4 days later, decided to let you know that it's not a big deal. And I thought this was very interesting. So I wanted to share this with you because we know it's going to get more expensive. We know it's going to be impactful when it comes to our personal finances and resources, but the media wants to make sure that you're not concerned with it. U.S. gas prices are unusually high. Here's why you shouldn't worry. Why should you worry about these unusually high prices? That's not going to be a problem for you at all, is it? New York, CNN, which I told you the reason I went with them is because of this irony that they put out just 4 days later on the level of spin that they're trying to work around this whole situation with. Falling leaves typically coincide with falling gas prices. As the summer driving season comes to a close and demand at the pump wanes, instead, gasoline prices are getting more expensive and are just pennies away from their highest level so far this year. That's because aggressive oil supply cuts, we went through all this, right? So they're trying to say that it's not a big deal because of their expert here, who is David Kelly, Chief Global Strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management, who doesn't seem to be involved in the oil industry other than the obvious asset management side of it. But it's very interesting that they have this idea that it's not going to be a big deal for you. There's some other shocks, some big storm in the Gulf of Mexico. It could spike higher. But as we look at this, we don't think the trend over the next year or two is going to be higher oil prices. They don't think so, even though 4 days before this, CNN was letting you know that things are getting very expensive. One thing we need to remember is that the price of everything has gone up, and all of the input costs of producing oil have increased. Sure, we're at $90 a barrel right now, but if you measure by today's dollars, we actually peaked at something like $184 per barrel back in 2008. When you adjust for inflation, oil isn't that high right now. Oh, well, thanks. That really helps me feel a lot better when it comes to how much it's costing me to fill up my tank. Another thing is that the U.S. has whittled away its strategic petroleum reserve. We've reduced that a lot. There was an inventory overhang we could use to try to balance the market. It's not as big as it was. Yes, I find that to be very comforting that we no longer have a strategic petroleum reserve. I mean, we sort of do, but it's much less than it used to be. Going forward, U.S. production is growing very rapidly. We're currently producing more crude oil than either Russia or Saudi Arabia. This is going to be a record year for U.S. liquid fuel production, and next year is going to be even stronger. Then why aren't we getting the relief? Oh, and by the way, I'm pretty sure the Biden administration just banned oil and gas leases on thousands of acres for the next 50 years, but I'm sure that's not a big deal. The global economy is growing slowly, and that's going to limit demand for growth for fossil fuel energy. And frankly, the green energy transition is also limiting the growth in demand. I have a feeling that's not exactly what's happening. So when I look at the supply side, I think the U.S. and other non-OPEC members will help. And when I look at the demand side, I don't see a lot of economic growth or demand for fossil fuels. So I don't expect economic trends to push prices much higher, although, of course, some shock could. I wonder what that shock could be. Could anyone here in the chat let me know if you think there's anything that could possibly happen over the course of the next year that might cause some sort of systematic shock when it comes to oil prices? I don't know, maybe like a global war or something like that. So just let me know in the chat. Go ahead and type in WW3 if you think that might have any level of impact on oil prices. So I just wanted to share that spin with everybody, because even though they're telling us the truth when it comes to how prices have risen and how expensive they're becoming and how we're going into the winter months where it will be more expensive in general, because life is just getting more expensive and everyone's going to be using different gas related products in order to maintain their warmth. I have a feeling we're not going to have a break on that anytime soon, regardless of what CNN tried to say 4 days after they let us know about how expensive gas is becoming. So moving on from there, what is the second thing? Because that was the first thing. What's the second thing that we won't be able to afford in 2024? If you have a guess, let me know. Everyone here is saying WW3. We also have people saying elections. We have people saying sanctions. I think there's a lot of reasons why all that's coming through, and I agree with many of you on that exact statement. Let's see here. It's $3.30 here in Texas, which is still too high for us. Chris Penton. Yeah, it's really high, Two Doctors Homestead, love your channel. Thank you for the videos, Magic. Well, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Monte Carlo, starting to think loaning Nigerian prince some money might be good for my financial future. Yeah, well, just make sure they're offering you some kind of rare breed of dog, and that way you're actually going to get your money's worth for that. So let's see here. The next shortage, and everyone's saying rice, toilet paper, meat, okay, and those are all good guesses. And DT says medicine, and we might talk about that later. But the next one on the list is actually going to be electricity. The power bill is getting higher everywhere, and this is becoming very difficult because, like I said before, people can already not afford their bills, and now we're in a situation where they're just going to go up. So what are people supposed to do? I don't necessarily know how this turns out, but I know it's not going to go well. So this is from Wisconsin. We're going to go over a couple examples tonight of this happening in different parts of the country because it affects everyone regardless of where you live. Because if this is happening in one place, it's likely happening to you as well. Maybe not yet, or maybe it already has, but eventually we'll all feel the pain of this. I can't afford my electric bill as it is. State regulators hear from customers on proposed rate hikes, and all these companies are proposing rate hikes for the same reason that we're all struggling, right? We're all sitting here going, man, I got to figure out a way to make a little more money or figure out a way to open up some of my financial breathing room because of how difficult life is becoming in the sense of inflation and the rising cost of living. And these companies are feeling that same burn because they're trying to, maintain their profits in order to make all their shareholders and everybody happy. And that's, unfortunately being passed on to us at the end user level. Customers from 3 Wisconsin utilities told state regulators this month that proposed rate increases could make it harder to afford utility bills. The Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, or PSC, held public hearings this month in rate cases for Alliant Energy, Xcel Energy, and Madison Gas and Electric. While some customers focused on affordability issues in their testimony, others said they feared changes proposed by Alliant and Madison Gas and Electric to reimbursements given to solar customers would slow down residential solar adoption if approved. This spring, Alliant Energy asked for an 8.4% increase to electric rates in 2024, and an additional 5.4% increase in 2025. Alliant requested a 6.3% rate hike in 2024. So they're asking for all these rate hikes for next year. That's a lot. If all of your cost of living went up 6.3% right now, do you have the breathing room to absorb another 6.3% of your total income, right? To go out to bills and to pay for your basic utilities and basic necessities? That's something that you should be considering right now because honestly, this is where things are heading. Everything's getting more expensive, but 2024 is kind of where things are going to start maybe tipping over the edge a little bit, especially for some of us who are already behind, okay? After its staff audit, the PSC estimated a 5.65% increase is needed for 2024 electric operations in Wisconsin, and 10.29% is needed for 2025. For natural gas, regulators recommended a 5.44% increase for 2024 and a 5.35% increase for 2025. So they're saying that they will need 10% increase by 2025 no matter what. And that's already after the 5.65% increase. So in 2 years, we're talking your electric bill is going to have a huge increase in cost. And what's going to change over those next 2 years in the sense of your income? Will you be getting raises? Are you going to get a promotion? Are you going to have a larger customer base if you run your own business? I mean, these are all things that you need to be aware of and understand to prepare for now. And you, at minimum, if let's say you're in Wisconsin right now, I would be planning on trying to figure out how to gain another 10 to 15% in my income in order to absorb this new cost that is literally being telegraphed to me via the media. And that's just the unfortunate truth of where we are right now in this country. It's very sad to see all this happening, but it is what it is. Hey, Dale Cobb, thanks for being a member and rejoining and all that good stuff. Just so everybody knows, I do have the members only live chat after this one. I do that just about every Monday now. It's for Subscribe Star members and YouTube channel members. So if you're a member and you're not aware of that, just go to the community page on my channel and you'll have the link there for that. And if you want to be part of it, just go ahead and hit that join button and then you can come hang out. And it's where I'm way more casual and we just kind of discuss whatever. So it's kind of fun. And this is my way of saying thank you to those who are supporting the channel directly that way. So we also have another electric company in the same exact situation. Right. And they've already been increasing their rates for the last 2 years. Lincoln Electric System seeking rate increase for second year in a row. Okay. Lincoln Electric System is seeking a rate increase for the second year in a row. The LES board on Friday heard the reasons behind why the utility believes it needs to boost rates 3.7% in 2024 after raising them 4.8% this year. So we're talking, they're already raising them and they're raising them more. Prior to that, LES hadn't raised rates for 5 years. The company says it's facing a budget deficit of $10.8 million in 2024, largely due to increased compensation costs for its employees. Like I said, everybody needs to make more money. Everybody has to pay out more. Where does that cost end up going eventually? Down to the consumer. That's how it always works, which is why taxing corporations never pays out the way everyone thinks it will, especially based on a certain ideology. Because, yeah, okay, you got them. They paid all their taxes. So great. The government has all this extra power now. But guess who is paying way more money now for their laundry machine? It's you. Your washing machine and your dryer are now 30% more expensive because you guys decided to charge the corporate entities of this country 30% in taxes. That's just how it works. It is what it is. Same thing's happening to us now based on our utilities, okay? Vice President of Financial Services and Chief Financial Officer Emily Koenig told the LES board Friday that the company gave employees 2 pay increases this year to make salaries more competitive and plans to add more staff next year. Benefits enhancements, including paid parental leave, also have contributed to increased cost. So everything sounds great, but someone has to pay for it. That all adds up to an additional $8.7 million to be spent on salaries and benefits in 2024. Now, I'm all about people getting paid more. I'm happy with that. I'm glad they're getting better benefits, and I'm glad they're being able to take care of their families better. But those same people are probably paying more for their power bill now. Literally, the employees of that power company are paying more for their power from the company that's paying them money, right? But that's just how it works. So that's just another example of this happening. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up the electricity is because it's an unavoidable cost for most of us. Now, some of you might be off grid or running solely on solar and figured out how to bypass the energy conglomerates, right? But in general, being tied to the grid has a lot of advantages, and people generally use that for their main source of power. I even do, even though I have the ability to use quite a bit of solar and everything else, it still just makes life easier to be able to turn that switch on and pay for a rate without worrying about whether or not the sun was good enough today or whether or not my batteries had enough time to charge or anything along those lines. So, but is it unfortunate that we have a situation where people are going to have to pay more for something that they need? Yes, because where does that money come from? If you have an idea, let me know. But in general, what we're seeing around the country is people getting more jobs, people working longer hours, or just defaulting on their loans or not paying their bills. I mean, I don't know what else to say. And that's unfortunate that we're in America of 2023 where this is like the norm. And I'm not a big fan of it, but here we are. And I guess, look, speaking of that, another sponsor of the channel is now Genesis Gold Group, right? And I decided to set up with them because I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I have to figure out ways to keep moving forward, especially in regards to building the channel and adding additional equipment and everything else that's required to keep moving forward. And I need more breathing room financially to be able to do so. And that's just the honest truth. So I know some people don't like it when I have to take on sponsors or promoters within the channel, but it's just part of the deal right now. I don't know what to tell everybody, and I'm not ashamed of it or anything. So magicpreppergold.com, if you guys are trying to stabilize some of your wealth in precious metals, go there, see what they can do for you. And you don't have to be Christian to work with this group. If you're not, that's not going to change their relationship with you. But I'm just letting you know that this is a company I'm working with now for a lot of the same reasons that many of you are probably trying to figure out other ways to, build more income and at the same time maybe stabilize some of your financial wealth, because also investing in, or not investing, but acquiring precious metals as assets is something that I do personally, and I think that it has its, let's just say, purposes when it comes to coming out on top at the end of the day. And when I say that, I think everyone knows what I mean. Post SHTF, I want to be the ruler of my area, okay? And I know some of you that are in my area here might be watching, so we'll be friends. Don't worry, okay? So, South Florida DCL says having 2 or 3 jobs just doesn't cut it anymore. And that's part of the problem, right? Even if you go out and get additional work, it's like you're just still trying to catch up, right? And of course, this doesn't apply to everybody. I know there are people out there that are doing well right now. I know there are people that have financial stability and have a good system set up for them where they are completely out of debt and they're doing fine. And that's great. But we have to remember, especially in this community, because we tend to kind of think inside of our own personal bubble on a regular basis. Like, hey, like I sometimes forget, like, hey, I'm here on land in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota, so certain things don't really apply to me. But that doesn't mean that a huge portion of the community here doesn't have to deal with some of the issues that I don't necessarily have to deal with. So the same applies here financially. Some of you are probably fine. Some of you are probably wealthy. That's great. But I think a large majority of this community are people who are living paycheck to paycheck because that's just the statistic at this point of this country. That's how Americans are having to deal with our current environment. And is some of it at the fault of our own because of the people who are making the decisions at the top right now? I would say, I guess so, depending how you look at it. So, but that's a different conversation. So, what else is going to cost more? Okay, here is where we're going. We're going to the third one, which is very important for all of us here in the prepping community and everyone on the planet in general: food. We already know the grocery store is out of control, but it's going to get worse in 2024. And it's just on a trajectory right now to skyrocket. And I'm trying my best to kind of not think about the food I have prepped and put away, especially the long-term stuff. Like, that's just gone. Like, that's not there. Unless it needs to be there, it's not there, right? But the rotational pantry, that can be a little bit more tempting at times because you're like, I don't really want to go to the store today and I've got all this food over here. But in general, like, you still need to have your supply, right? So it's becoming more and more difficult to not access your personal pantry while still paying the prices that are coming our way. And a lot of it's due to things that are outside of the food environment in some ways. And according to this article, which is the Independent Commodity Intelligence Services, food prices set for further rise as energy and fertilizer costs increase. And a lot of people don't tend to consider the idea that fertilizer is like a byproduct of some of these energy sectors that are constantly being regulated. And in order to feed the planet and the size of the population we currently have, you have to use fertilizer. You have to use chemicals, in all honesty. I know a lot of people, especially in this community, are like, I only want organic, and I don't want these chemicals, and I know what they're trying to do to my brain and everything else, which is fine, but you can't feed the entire continent of Africa with good ideas, right? Like, so you need some of this stuff, and without it, there's going to be a lot of people starving. That's just the reality of where we are at this point in the world with this large of a population. So, fertilizer markets don't grab the headlines. And that's why I'm bringing this to your attention, because it's true. This is not like a sexy topic, right? We're not like, oh, wow, like a mushroom cloud. What could that possibly be, right? I'm sorry. And I know that's why there's 660 of you here tonight instead of 1,200. It's because we're talking about something that's practical and not very headline grabbing, but it's still relevant and very important so that you can properly strategize moving forward over the next year or two, because this is going to affect everyone. It just is. Fertilizer markets don't grab the headlines, but 4 billion people, half the world's population, rely on nitrogen fertilizer for their food, according to our World in Data. And Russia's invasion means prices are rising whilst availability is decreasing. And just so you know, this is an article from yesterday. Like, this is not old info that I'm digging up. Generally, everything we talk about on these chats, in case you're new here, is from within the past week. So I'm trying to have relevant new information to give you the best data I can. So everything we're talking about tonight is from this past week. And then if I reference something historically in order to kind of build a better understanding as to what it is we're discussing, I always tend to mention that just so everybody's on the same page. So I'm not just like, oh, and here's this article from 2007, but I'm not going to talk about that. It's from that far back. It's just going to fit my narrative tonight, which I'm not saying other people do that, but I'm saying you should probably keep an eye out for that because that does happen sometimes. Okay. So the chart shows natural gas prices and ammonia costs since 2020. The natural gas is the raw material for ammonia. Its price was typically around 20 euros per megawatt hour and has more than doubled to 50 euros per megawatt hour today. And of course, prices will likely go higher as winter boosts natural gas demand. Ammonia costs have followed nat gas higher. They were around $250 per ton before the invasion. Today, they are $200 a ton higher and still rising. Buyers expect nat gas prices will move higher, and so they are starting to buy ahead of the price rises. So keep that in mind. The buyers anticipate the prices going up, so they buy everything out, which raises the price, right? Because of the demand that suddenly spikes. And the price was already going to go up, hence the new demand. So it actually exponentially raises it even further because of the activity regarding it. But of course, not everyone can afford to pay higher prices, and the invasion has actually cut large supplies of Russian gas due to sanctions. As the ICIS chart shows, up to 70% of Europe's fertilizer output has been shut down at times over the past 18 months. Farmers have been caught both ways. Supplies have been reduced, and they have had to pay much higher prices. Of course, this doesn't catch the news headlines. Fertilizer markets aren't like oil markets, where higher prices immediately increase the gasoline price at the pump. Instead, farmers buy fertilizer to feed their crops for the next growing season. So the problems start to come a year later, when the reduced crop comes to market at higher prices. Europe's problems are, of course, having a global impact. U.S. farmers were badly hit last year, as Modern Farmer reported in December. 2022's drastic increase in fertilizer prices has hit farmers' pockets, and many have opted to buy less fertilizer. And farmers globally are now preparing for the worst. As India's Daily Star paper reported at the weekend, global fertilizer costs have been surging over the past 2 months. So understand that over the last 2 months, we've had this surge of cost regarding global fertilizers, right? Okay, well, that's not going to be seen for like a year. So that's why we have to prepare for this financial implication now. And now that you're aware of it, you can start thinking about it and going, okay, look, I know things are expensive right now, but I know because of this information that they're only going to be more expensive next year. So how do you prepare for that? That's something that you need to start game planning yourself right this second, okay? We can see the impact in the chart showing food price indices in the USA, Europe, and Japan. They have all moved higher since the invasion and seem set for another move over the winter. Similarly, the FAO cereals index nearly doubled after the invasion. It then fell back a bit as Ukraine cereal exports resumed, but Russia refused to renew the deal in July, and this is set to push prices higher, as the BBC reports. Ukraine is one of the world's biggest suppliers of crops such as sunflower oil, barley, maize, and wheat. Its export share is huge, and it holds top 4 market positions: 46% of sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, barley, and corn, and wheat. So yeah, that's all going to be affected. Just throwing it out there. Here's another thing just to kind of think about regarding meat, because I know one of you did say meat in the chat earlier when I was asking if you could guess what the next thing that we won't be able to afford in 2024 is going to be. U.S. cattle feed costs have been rising due to high fertilizer prices, as the U.S. Department of Agriculture reports. So feed costs go up, price of beef goes up, everything goes up. So how is this applying to us on more of like an individual basis? Or how does this apply to us at the more individual level, I guess is what I'll say, okay? Well, I buy a lot of my food at the grocery store. I'm sure many of you do as well. So how does that look right now? This is from September 13th. Now, this article came out before then, but it was updated September 13th. So we have the newer information based on the CPI that was released post this article being published. Food prices in August 2023 increased 4.3% from the same time in 2022. And that's an overall. So when I look at beef and I'm like, well, that's up 30%. Well, that doesn't apply to this number of 4.3%. It applies to just beef. But as an average, if you go across the board, we're talking 4.3%. Have food prices been rising? Absolutely, thanks to a combination of inflation, pandemic-related supply chain disruptions, and tariffs on certain foreign imports. Food prices have steadily risen since 2020. But inflation has been slowing in the past year, and the latest data shows the cost of groceries aren't rising as fast as they once were. And then the new CPI report came out. According to the most recent CPI index from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, by comparison, at the same time in 2022, prices rose 10.9% over a one-year period. So I love how we've gotten to the point of normalcy bias regarding this, right? Now we're at the point where 10.9% is no big deal. Here we are, and everyone's still alive. So the CPI came out, and now you can see like inflation and everything, it's settling down a little bit. 10.9% is not a low number. Like this is not the average. That's not what we should be shooting for by any means. And yet the media is still trying to kind of calm everybody down. They don't want to induce any panic. They don't want anyone to freak out about the economy, because the only way that this whole thing is still maintaining its level of life support is the fact that people are still going out and consuming and buying and spending. Because there is a point where people realize that they're not getting what they're paying for anymore, and they stop spending. And when that happens, everything starts to fall apart, right? So they're going to keep telling you that this is actually getting better, but in reality, 10.9% year over year, and then all the other increases prior to that stacked on top of it is not a good thing. It's not helpful at all. So let's see here. I do want to jump in the chat for a minute. Bob from accounting, a family is the next thing we can't afford. Good thing I don't have a family. Well, Bob, I will tell you, as someone who does have a family, that it is expensive to have a family right now, and not in any other sense than the fact that more mouths to feed costs more money. I mean, it's just the honest truth, right? So life is more difficult for everyone, and those who have, people that depend on them are going to be struggling even harder, most likely, just because it requires that many more resources in order to accomplish that goal. So it is what it is. But here we are. And let's see, Joe, the economy is great. Just ask the machine. Yeah. And that's kind of my issue. I'm like, I can't believe that we have certain aspects of the media trying to spin the fact that, like, the economy's not too bad. Okay. It's just really not that bad. So, hey, what do you want? We can't expect these people to be completely honest, right? And earlier I forgot to do it, but if you are interested in that Genesis Gold Group situation, I'll just go ahead and put the link in the chat right now because it does help support the channel. You guys end up investing or not invest. You work with them and end up acquiring assets and precious metals like gold and silver, then I'll actually, get supported by that, which means I'll turn that into lead and brass. So you get gold and silver, I get lead and brass, and we're going to have a good time with it. Okay. Because I really do need a lot more ammo. I'm not going to lie. All right. So Florida Sheepdog, the button in the U.S. controls nukes. In China, it shuts down our electronics. Yeah, well, and there's a lot of speculation surrounding that, especially based on the fact that even a lot of our military has used Chinese-made microchips and computing equipment for quite some time. And I know there's been initiatives to move away from that, but there is that red dragon scenario people discuss where they have the kill switch on a lot of electronic devices. And they have found spying devices that transmit radio frequencies within things like smart TVs over the years to have some evidence as to that being a possibility, right? Let's see. Lefty GR, you said we should all be preparing. Obviously not SHTF, but it's a challenge to prepare for. Tornadoes, EMPs, and changing living costs are all worth prepping. Yeah, and it can be full-on SHTF too. Like, don't forget that. Like, that's a real possibility. Every day this conflict in Eastern Europe goes on for is a day closer we might actually be in that SHTF moment we've all talked about for many years now. But we also have to understand that the slow decay of our cities and the replacement of our police forces with those who may not be qualified or of the right character to be in those positions, and everything else that's been going on around the country is eventually going to make its way further and further away from those problematic areas. So if you live 3.5 hours from, like, Chicago, let's say, for example, eventually if that city decays to the point of complete lawlessness, that lawlessness will eventually further itself away from that area and make its way out to the more suburban and rural environments, just based on the way things work. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's just how humans work. We migrate, right? When all the resources are gone, we go on to the next place. I mean, that's just like biological instinct in our brains, right? So I would assume some of those things could occur. I'm just going to throw that out there. Now, and if you guys don't believe me, take a look at South Africa right now, because in all reality, that's a case study worth watching and paying attention to. And I would let you know you're probably going to get a video on it here in the near future, because there's a lot of parallels there with what's happening here in the U.S. And those people also didn't think real SHTF would ever happen. And now they're having to take the law into their own hands in the most, let's just say, unfortunate way that you could imagine. So what else is going to cost more in 2024 that we can't afford? Okay. This is a very unfortunate one. This is reality. That's why we're talking about it. Okay. Housing. How are you going to afford to live in a home in 2024? I am very fortunate that I was able to buy. I financed my home. I have a mortgage. I don't try to front anybody here based on like what I've done in order to further my goals or accomplish my goals. But yeah, I financed my home because I was throwing money away paying rent anyway. So to me, it's really not that big of a deal to mortgage a home if you're able to afford it and if you're already going to be spending money no matter what, right? So yeah, I financed my house, but I got locked into a fixed rate, and it's not bad, right? It's a pretty good rate compared to where we are now. HUD's 2024 fair market rents average 10%, second straight large annual jump. 10% increase in rent in 1 year. Fair market rents used as the basis for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to set rents for housing choice vouchers saw a substantial increase for the second consecutive year. HCVs allow low income families to access safe and decent housing. And sometimes they turn those neighborhoods into something other than safe and decent. But I'm not going to say I've ever personally experienced that, but I may have. Anyway, sorry, but that's just my experience. HUD released FMRs for fiscal year 2024 on August 31st with an effective date of October 1st. Oh, and by the way, this was published on September 11th. Okay. FMRs are a critical part of the low-income housing tax credit and residential rental tax-exempt private activity bond programs. FMRs impact that income limits used both for determining who qualifies to live in LIHTC PAB housing and how much tenants pay to rent that home in high housing cost areas. In addition, many LIHTC and PAB housing units are occupied by tenants who are using HCVs. FMRs also play an important role in setting the high home rents. If this article wasn't written by like Haley Strategic, then I don't know who's writing this, but the acronyms here have got to go. There are just too many acronyms, all right? And the only reason I bring up Haley Strategic is because people will ask me a lot, hey, what's the chest rig that you're running there, Magic? And it's legitimately the HSP TRMP CRX. And when I say that and when I type it out, I feel pretty silly. So that's what reminded me of that while reading this article right now. 2024 FMRs by the numbers. Like fiscal year 2023, most areas will see a large increase. After anemic increases in fiscal year 2022, FMRs, there have been 2 consecutive years with an average increase of more than 10%. And I put the than in there just to kind of help them out with some of their grammar. Nearly 99% of all areas will see an increase in FMRs in fiscal year 2024, with the average increase of 10% over the prior year. The following areas are those with an increase of 20% or more. Now, here's the thing. I could not afford if my mortgage jumped 10%, which means I wouldn't be able to afford if my rent jumped 10%, which means anyone who's already struggling to pay rent, like what are they supposed to do? And people will say, well, like, get another job. Maybe they already have 2 jobs. Maybe they already have 3 jobs. Okay, well, maybe they just need to move somewhere cheaper. Okay, well, that sounds good. But have you ever been in a situation, and I'm like legitimately asking you this, chat, you can just say, put a Y in the chat, or if you don't want to divulge this, don't divulge it, of course. But if you've ever been in this situation, because I have in my life, because I'm not afraid to say that I've been in financial situations that were difficult at times, right? It's kind of part of growing up, I guess. But if you've ever been in a situation where the only thing that would work for you is to move somewhere cheaper, and you could not afford to move somewhere cheaper, let me know in the chat, because that's a legit thing that has happened to many, many people, myself included. I was in a place where I couldn't afford to be anymore because of a change in my income that was sudden. And then in order to get into a new place, what did I have to do? Well, I had to break my lease, which required me to pay like a full month's rent without living there for that month, and to, basically let them absorb a security deposit, which is kind of just part of the deal, let's be honest. And then I was also going to have to come up with first month's, last month's, and a deposit at another place, and prove that I can make 3 times the rent of that place in the process. So that's a very difficult thing to do if you're already at the point where you can't afford your rent, right? How many people are like, well, I can't afford my rent, but I've got $7,000 in the bank? Like, that's just not a very typical scenario. So I understand the thought process of being like, well, you just need to live somewhere cheaper. But if you've never been in that position where you suddenly had to go somewhere cheaper and you literally couldn't afford to live somewhere cheaper, it's hard to kind of, I guess, picture it in your mind. But the way I just described it is what happens to millions of Americans every year. They want to live somewhere cheaper. They realize they're in over their head, but they literally can't afford to go anywhere else because of the way it all works. And that's just where we are right now. But here's a couple examples of places where rent is expected to go up 20% or more by 2024. 20%. Can you increase your income by 20% right now? It's not an easy thing to accomplish at all. So let's see. We have Lake County, Colorado, Esmeralda County, Nevada, Jacksonville, North Carolina, Kane County, Utah. Let's see here. Let's try to get around the country a little bit. We've got Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Waco, Texas, Kearney County, Kansas, Memphis, Tennessee, Tunica County, Mississippi. We've got McCormick County, South Carolina, Kennewick, Richland, Washington, Johnson County, Wyoming. All these places are expecting a 20% or more increase in rent by 2024. If you live in any of those places, and if you, here, I'm going to share this article link in the chat right now. And if you're here on the replay, I'll put these links down in the pinned comment as well as in the description. Or no, just in the pinned comment, because the description, that's a whole different thing. I'll put it in the pinned comment so you guys have access to these links on the replay as well, because this might be important information for you to look at. But if you live in these areas where it's going to go up 20%, you better start planning for how you're going to have 20% more income to cover that rent, right? And then also, let's see here. Let's go down to 10%. Or no, not 10%, but this is the increases for the largest cities, okay? So, and probably some of you in here are in these large cities because, I mean, let's be honest, they are large population centers, so the chances are high that some of you are here. New York City is going up 11%. Los Angeles is going up 13%. Chicago's going up 16%. Houston's going up 4%. Phoenix is going up 7%. Philadelphia is going up 15%. San Antonio is going up 12%. San Diego is going up 15%. Dallas is going up 11%. And San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, California is going up 6%. And that's for 2-bedroom apartments or homes or whatever else they're trying to count in that number. So remember, this is the fourth thing that we're not going to be able to afford in 2024. It's going to get very expensive. I don't know what else to say. And I feel bad for those who are trying their best. And like, it's hard because people want to place judgment very often, right? Like, you should have made a better decision, right? Or you should have made more money. Or you shouldn't have gotten such an expensive place. Life is crazy. Things change and things happen, and sometimes it's out of our control, you know? When I was working and living in a very expensive home over near the East Bay of California, did I expect my employer at the time to be cooking the books and taking like $2,500 out of my income every month? No. So things had to change, right? And yeah, so what do you do? Anyway, and that was all just speculation. So let's talk about Canada for a second, because I know I have a lot of great Canadians here in the chat. And I'm in North Dakota, so we are technically neighbors. And I do like you, because if you're here, you're the good kind of Canadians, and we like them, all right? So rent is going up more than $100 a month right now, pushing average asking price to new record. Just look at what's happening in Canada, and don't expect it to just stay in Canada. Average asking price for a new tenant has risen by 9.6% in the last year, rentals.ca says. Although the pace of increase has come down ever so slightly, the price of a rental accommodation in Canada continues to go up, with the average new tenant now being asked to pay $2,117 a month. That's the average in Canada. Wow. The $2,117 figure is an increase of 9.6% from the average rent in August of last year. That's down from an all-time high of 12% recorded from August of 2021 until August of 2022, but still the highest ever figure in dollar terms. The ongoing tumult in the housing market has garnered numerous headlines of late, as the Bank of Canada's campaign to tame inflation has caused mortgage rates to skyrocket. And yes, that is part of the issue. When you raise interest rates in order to stop inflation, people, especially landlords who might have adjustable rate mortgages, are going to have to charge quite a bit more for their rent suddenly. So yeah, and this was posted September 12th. So I'm just letting you guys know it's not just here in the United States. It's also in Canada, which means it's happening pretty much everywhere. Now, here's another interesting little tidbit. Housing. We're still talking about housing, okay? Well, how about buying a house? Like I said, I'm in a lucky position. I bought a house back when it was still feasible. My interest rate is fixed and low enough to where I'm pretty happy with it. But what about waiting to buy one because of how crazy interest rates are right now? Well, Barbara Cochran, I think was from Shark Tank, says housing prices are going to go through the roof. Here's when. And this is something I thought was interesting because a lot of people are expecting a crash, which in many ways I also do. But I understand the thought process here, which should let you know that maybe waiting for things to stabilize isn't always the best idea. And I think we've all learned that over the years when it comes to food prices, ammunition prices, anything that you stockpile basically, right? Or anything that you want to have as an asset. waiting for it to get cheaper doesn't always come true, right? Like that time may never come. And this is what some of these people are speculating on now at this point based on our current conditions. If you're a prospective home buyer, you're likely in a tough spot. While you may be tempted to wait for interest rates to drop, if you wait too long, you could be dealing with a surge in home prices. And by the way, this is from September 17th, yesterday. Okay. In a recent Fox Business interview, real estate entrepreneur and Shark Tank star Barbara Cochran shared her prediction for when home prices will rise and how much she expects them to increase and more. And this is where things sound kind of counterintuitive, but these people are the people with the money that do the things, so they tend to have a little bit of an insight as to how this stuff works, right? We're currently experiencing a bottleneck in the real estate market, Cochran said, but this won't last forever. Sellers don't want to move from their apartment or their home because they don't want to take on higher interest rates. And the buyers are too afraid to buy because they are getting less house for the price. So you've got a standoff going on, but things are changing. Cochran believes there will be a major swing in the real estate market as soon as interest rates drop. The minute those interest rates come down, all hell's going to break loose and the prices are going to go through the roof, she said. Right now, sellers are staying put, but they're not going to stay put if interest rates go down by 2 points. It's going to be a signal for everybody to come back out and buy like crazy, and the house prices will likely go up by 20%. We could have the COVID market all over again. Although a recent report found that home prices experienced their first annual decline in 11 years, Cochran noted that has not been the case everywhere in the U.S. In the coastal areas, prices are going down because houses are just so not affordable, she said. But if you look in the Southwest, prices are going up. You have some cities where prices are rebounding by 20% in 6 months. Another area where prices will continue to rise is South Florida. Home prices in South Florida are still going up, and it's one of the hottest markets, Cochran said. People love Florida, and people are paying anything. I don't get it. It's not my cup of tea, but it's doing very, very well. Don't expect a major housing market crash. Although we are facing a precarious real estate market, Cochran said we won't see a catastrophic housing market collapse like the one that occurred in 2008, due in large part to the subprime mortgage crisis. People have their hard-earned cash in the market. People aren't over-leveraged, she said. There's really no comparison to now compared to what came before. So her thought process is that because everyone's waiting to buy, when the opportunity to buy finally comes around, all the sellers who have been waiting for that same opportunity will suddenly list, and all the buyers who've been waiting for that opportunity will suddenly buy, which means the prices will go up because demand will likely outpace supply. So I'm not saying you should buy a house now. I'm not telling anybody they should do anything like that. But I'm telling you that if your plan is to wait around for things to get cheaper or for rates to get lower or whatever it is, you should consider those concepts because rent is only getting higher. Interest rates aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And these home prices don't sound like they're getting lower. It sounds like in many cases they're probably going to go up. And we can't afford it. So I tried to find another alternative. Like, hey, what about, buying a home instead of renting? Because rent's going way up all over the country. Well, buying a house might be just as difficult for all of the reasons, either the cost of the home, the interest rate of the loan, or anything else related to it. So, number 5. What can number 5 be? Real quick, let's jump in the chat for a second. Okay. Let's see. Prepper Now says Lars and Luke agree to disagree. Sometimes you guys just got to agree to disagree. It's fine. We can all move on. We'll be okay, guys. Viv B, US dollar is also just funny money, too. It's just the best looking turd in the punch bowl at the moment. Yeah, well, Viv B, we just hit $33 trillion in national debt, which is not a real number. And one of the things that I tend to consider whenever I'm, making purchases or buying preps or whatever it is, I always kind of like to think about that. I'm like, this money is like literally not even real. It's not even like a real thing. Yeah, it's important to have right now in the sense of like making your way through modern society and being able to transact. But in reality, this money that I'm buying these actual prep items with is basically worthless based on the amount of debt that we have as a country. But these preps are not worthless and in fact are going to be very valuable if that time ever comes. So it gives me a little bit of justification, but it's also a little bit daunting because of how utterly screwed we are economically as a country. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's kind of like the nicest way to put it at this point, right? So, which I do that a lot. In case anybody hasn't noticed, I like to say so. in all of my videos, or now. And I don't know what causes it. I think it's just, spastic issues within my brain. So I'm sorry that the nerves aren't firing on all cylinders all the time. What else is going to be unaffordable in 2024? I will tell you, it is something that someone guessed earlier in the chat. DT, I believe, said it, and I believe it to be true. Prescription medicines are going to go up in price 10%. Everything's... See what I mean by like having to strategize that additional income before next year? Like have a plan for like how you're going to absorb these costs, because it's not just food. It's not just electricity. It's not just housing. It's also medicine. It's also fuel. If everything's going up to this degree, you have to be able to afford it or you will not afford it. And I don't know what that means for you on a personal level, but for some people that means going homeless. And for some people that means not being able to feed their kids. Like I don't know what it means for each individual, but I do know that this means if you don't have a plan in place or some thought process as to how you're going to tackle this issue, you're going to be unprepared when it actually hits you full on. Prescription costs projected to rise nearly 10% according to 2024 Segal Health Plan Cost Trends Survey. It's from Business Wire. This is from September 14th. Okay. New York. The projected annual cost trend for outpatient prescription drugs is expected to approach 10%, coming after 3 years of actual trend exceeding projections, according to new data from the 2024 Segal Health Plan Cost Trends Survey, released by leading benefits and HR consulting firm Segal. Additionally, the per-person cost trend for open access PPO and POS plans is projected to be 6.8%, and the medical trend projections for Medicare-eligible retirees with Medicare Advantage PPO plans is forecasted to be 4.9%. The projected rise is to be driven by factors including prescription Medicare Advantage PPO plans, or I already said that, including prescription drug inflation, which continues to be the primary driver for inpatient hospital, physician, and overall prescription medication trends. Specialty drug trend alone, okay? And I want you to really think about this. If you, as a patient, require specialty drugs in order to maintain your functionality, right? Your health. Specialty drug trend alone is projected to be nearly 15%, driven by higher utilization of new high-cost specialty drugs replacing lower-cost therapies. Diabetes, autoimmune disease, and psoriasis have been the top 3 disease indications for prescription drugs over the past few years. However, since the first quarter of 2021, anti-obesity medications have shown the greatest growth, climbing 114%. This is due to many factors, including the off-label weight loss use stemming from social media buzz and exponential market investments in anti-obesity drugs, as well as the American Diabetes Association recommending GLP-1 medication to reduce health complications. GLP-1 drugs will account for more than half of all diabetes drug therapies claim costs by the end of this year. Okay, now that coincides with other health costs that are also going to be unaffordable here very soon. In case you don't know already, your health insurance premiums are also going up. Health insurance premiums are set to surge in 2024, published September 12th. Not just go up, but surge. Health insurance throughout your workplace could be much more expensive next year. Costs for employer-sponsored health plans in 2024 are expected to jump over 6%, according to new data from consulting firms Mercer and Willis Towers. Watson, abbreviated WTW, as the Wall Street Journal first reported, that would amount to the largest price increase for employer health plans in about a decade. Mercer's survey released Thursday found that the health plan costs could jump by 6.6% next year, assuming employers made no cost-cutting changes to their current plans. And even if they do take steps to cut costs, the increase is expected to be 5.4% on average. Similarly, in the preliminary survey results shared with Money, WTW found that health insurance costs are expected to rise between 6 and 6.4%. According to Mercer, typical annual price increases have hovered between 3 and 4% for more than a decade, making next year's estimated hikes particularly steep. Having an emergency fund is now more important than ever. So this is probably just an ad for loans or who knows what else, but this is probably not bad advice, let's be honest, right? Inflation is finally catching up to health insurance. As workers head into open enrollment season to sign up for 2024 health plans, they may be in for some sticker shock. Perhaps surprisingly, private health insurance is one area where inflation has largely yet to reach. In fact, the latest inflation reading from Labor Department shows health insurance costs in a notable period of deflation, meaning that prices are going down. For the year ending in July, overall health insurance costs fell nearly 30%, even as the cost of prescription drugs and other medical supplies jumped. Why the disconnect? Experts say that hospitals and other healthcare providers have been dealing with elevated prices all along, but those price increases didn't immediately seep through to health insurance because financial contracts are typically negotiated every few years. The outlook for 2024 health insurance prices. After seeing overall inflation rates often in the 7 to 9% range, a 6.5% increase might not sound so bad. See how they do that? They always like to remind you that it's not so bad. But health insurance plans are extremely expensive. On average, it costs about $14,000 per employee, according to the Journal. The projected increase could add almost $1,000 to the total. The good news is that, in theory, you won't have to foot the entire increase yourself. Employers typically split the cost of health insurance with their employees, with a portion of the cost deducted from each paycheck in the form of a premium. Now, here's what you need to understand. If you have employer-sponsored health insurance, the plan rates are going up, which means it's probably going to cost you more, which means you're now bringing home less money than you were before because they're having to recuperate more of it for your health insurance plan. So this is another avenue of unaffordability that's coming our way. If you work at a job where you get insurance through your job right now, which is generally one of the better options, because if they pay for it either completely or partially, that allows you to, have it a little bit more affordable for yourself. But if that's part of your deal right now, just be aware that there's a good chance you're going to be paying, 7% more for it next year than you are right now, which means 7% less income coming home in your pocket, which means that 10% increase in rent, and that 10% increase in food, and that 10% increase in fuel, and that 10% increase in electricity, all is going to come to a point where you can't afford it. Oh, and don't forget your 10% increase in your obesity pills, I guess, is what they're really pushing over there. So Big Pharma didn't make enough off the vax, says Florida Sheepdog 1. Well, you know what? That's probably got some truth to it in their eyes, because guess what? They still have shareholders that require a profit every single quarter. So, and you almost got me there, because we got to keep this show rolling, and we can't have any crazy stuff going on around here, Let's see here. Hunt Outdoors says, Magic, if the auto industry strike grows and becomes long, everything from cars to car parts, even food and items everyone wants and buys will get so high it will hurt all pockets. Yes, and that's where we are right now as a country. Every time something goes up in cost, it trickles down to something else. And it just makes its way through the economy. And the things we discussed tonight, the 5 things, right? So do you guys remember what they are? Because that's important. We had fuel, right? We had electricity, okay? Then we had food. Then we had rent or housing. And then we had medicine or healthcare. And all of those are going to cost more next year, according to the reports that are being put out right now. Like, this isn't just me speculating. This is reporting done by industries that their whole job is to plan for these things in advance, to forecast in order to make financial preparations for how they're going to strategically recuperate those losses. So this is all coming from the industries that are within these areas where the prices are increasing. And we have to prepare for it as best we can. Like I said, this is not a sexy topic. This is not something that everybody runs to come talk about or come, listen to, because, it's not about nuclear war. It's not about missing F-35s. It's not about gun control, right? Like, I get it. And I understand that. I do. But this is still important for us to be aware of, because you got to prepare for these things too. You can't just not. And, if you don't think there was any strategy of me bringing on additional sponsors to the channel, then obviously what I'm talking about right now, I guess, didn't apply to myself. But these are things that we should all be trying to do in order to prepare for this oncoming increase in the cost of living, no matter how you want to look at it. And don't have any reservations about taking a second job or taking on another income stream, or even trying to do something for yourself that could eventually lead to an income, like starting a YouTube channel, because if you do it well and it works well for you and you have a very supportive community that I'm very grateful and appreciative of having here, then it can be another source of income for you. But that's not something you should plan on necessarily. And you can't plan on everything working out. That second job you get might not work out, right? That investment you made that's supposed to pay you back 10%, it might not work out. Like these things don't always go the way they're supposed to. So you have to also be ready to pivot, and you also have to have contingency plans, which is all part of prepping, right? So that we're all on the same page here. I think Janae K, you just got a second job. Good for you. As long as that's what you feel is going to work best for you, especially when balancing financial situations right now, as well as your own personal well-being, then I'm very happy for you. And that's great. But you know what? That might be a requirement for a lot of people. And that's unfortunately where we're heading. And don't be surprised. And here's how we're gonna end this tonight. Do not be surprised if all of these costs add up to an eventual universal basic income. Do not be surprised when the federal government decides to step in and be everybody's savior, right? What an opportunity to get everyone on your side. Dear America, everything costs more by like 10%, somehow, some way. So, as your government, we're going to come in and offer you 10% of your universal basic income to cover those costs. You're welcome. All you have to do is vote for me. Also, we will tax you on all that money. Have a nice day. Do not be surprised. When everyone gets desperate, the government will try to throw money at it. They will, because it's still in their best interest to not have us literally marching in the streets, right? And one thing you have to keep in mind is that a lot of the programs that we have in this country right now to help those who are hurting the most, in many ways, are pacification systems. Because desperate people who are hungry or lack the basic necessities become dangerous. And that's just reality. And we're seeing it in our major cities every day. But they're still relatively isolated. But if it was countrywide, that'd be a lot of desperate people who could potentially become dangerous. So, wanted to make sure we had this conversation. Thank you all so much for being here every Monday. I really appreciate the support. These conversations are important to have. Like I said, they're not the funnest, but they are important. And if you need anything else from me, magicprepper.com is there. I do try to respond to your messages. I don't get to all of them. Just one guy here. I don't have a team. I don't have a cameraman even. Okay? I need one. I really do, but it's just me. So thank you all so much. The support is amazing. Mods, thank you for being here. And if you need anything else from me at all, you know where to go. Besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.